Bienvenue à Ecosystème.
Merci, Émilie. Welcome to Ecosysteme, a podcast by Maddyness and London Partners that takes listeners behind the entente cordiale and special business relationship that exists between Paris and London. I'm David Johnson, Editor-in-Chief at Maddyness UK.
And I'm Émilie Pierre-Desmonde, Director of Operations at Maddyness France. Let's deep dive into the London and Paris ecosystems, meeting the founders, innovators, investors, and key stakeholders that are driving them.
So as we head towards the Paris Olympics, it's only right to say, à vos marques, get set.
Partez!
Oh, and yes, Émilie is indeed in Paris.
Thank you, David, but that's where the clichés stop. Let's get down to business. For the first episode of Ecosystème, where better to launch than at Vivatech? And who better to start with than two people synonymous with startup, scale-up and tech businesses in their respective capitals?
Exactement, Émilie. I had the chance to speak with Citron, CEO of London Partners, to hear what makes London so attractive, open and desirable to international founders.
And I welcome Clara Chappaz, Director of Mission French Tech, to the Maddyness office in Paris to learn how the French ecosystem is inspired and influenced by thriving London.
So Laura, our podcast is called Ecosysteme. What does that word mean to you?
I love thinking about ecosystems because what it means, it's understanding that the way you grow a company isn't in a straight line. You need all these different moving parts to come together. So when we think about an ecosystem in London, we've got our startups and scale-ups, our VC investors, our capital markets, our corporate buyers, the public for all of our consumer businesses, our regulators, and that whole network of supporters like incubators, accelerators, everyone who comes together like a village, but it's a big city, to really help companies to grow.
I suppose talking about ecosystems, we're here to look at the London and Paris ecosystem and how they can collaborate and combine. And obviously, the more people involved in an ecosystem, the better. Imagine then I'm a Paris-based or French entrepreneur thinking I want to grow my business internationally. Obviously, I think of London. Hopefully, I get to meet you. What would your words of advice be for my first days and approaches in the capital?
So number one, you've been very good company because London is the number one destination that French entrepreneurs choose to expand to in Europe. And number two, you have done the right thing by coming to talk to me because at London Partners, our whole thing is helping, in this case, French businesses to expand into London and to grow. So tick your first two boxes. You're on the right track. What would I say? I would say really think about localization. One of the mistakes we sometimes see French entrepreneurs make is assume that the product that worked really well in the domestic market doesn't need any adaptation to come into the UK. It's close, but it's not identical. So we need to think about that. The second is be clear whether you're coming into London to raise or for business development, to build sales. And it's fine to be doing both, but you can be quite torn if you're trying to build business and fundraise at the same time. They're both quite time consuming. And also being clear with us and the ecosystem what your intentions are would be really helpful. And be confident that you're at the right stage of development. What we find is if you come to London too early, you can burn a lot of runway because you don't yet have product market fit and you're not actually ready to really scale. But equally, London is a great launch pad to scale. So if you're serious about raising a bigger round and going international, London is probably your best first bet for an international market. So I'd say pick your moment.
Pick your moment, do your planning and preparation. I suppose immerse yourself in the ecosystem as much as possible before committing or as part of the commitment. What unique challenges do businesses face today when starting up or growing in London?
Some of the challenges of London, which I guess may be different coming from the French market, it's a much bigger ecosystem. So to give you a sense of scale, in Paris, there are around 430 VCs, venture capital businesses. In London, there are 1,200 at least. So you're operating in a much, much bigger market. That has massive benefits because obviously bigger pools of capital, more customers, but you need to make a space for yourself and you need to make some noise and you need to build communities. One of the things that's really nice, I think, about being a French entrepreneur in London particularly is that you've got such a lovely supportive community. Because there's a big French diaspora anyway, there's over 100,000 French nationals that live in London, there are 15 French schools, it's a really vibrant community. And you've got La French Tech, which gives you that kind of home from home and that like we're in the same team and they all help each other out. So that's a massive advantage and I would really use that. But equally, you need to break out of the French ecosystem. You're not going to build a business in London by only hanging out with French entrepreneurs. So find out what are the best events for your sector, which we can help with at London and Partners. We'll guide you, which are the best events, which are the best incubators, which are the best accelerators. We can help you to get speaking slots at some of those important events to build that brand and that credibility in the space.
So it's all about growing that network and seeing beyond maybe the existing, as you rightly say, very big French entrepreneurial network in London. For you, I suppose you sit seeing all the interesting industries and growth markets in London and beyond. What are the ones that are really driving growth and innovation in London right now?
So probably pretty similar to Paris, I'd say. So for us, it's climate tech is the fastest growing. Real strengths in deep tech, particularly AI, and we've seen massive investments from Google and Microsoft into AI deep tech. Our creative industries are always very strong, particularly around gaming and immersive. Film and TV is booming, and then life sciences is the other one that's really going gangbusters. Fintech, including kind of red tech, insure tech, cyber, has always been really strong, though it's had a difficult couple of years, but we think it's coming back now. Those are probably the big ones, with climate tech as by far the fastest growing that we can see. Which is great.
Which is great.
We all need that, right?
Yeah. And also, I think represent great opportunities because, as you said, they're happening in both ecosystems. These are issues that affect Paris and London. And happening in both places. What would you share as some of the top tips for an international business coming to London, probably not for the first time? I think people have been to London before as a tourist or as a French exchange student. What would the top tips be for navigating today's London business ecosystem?
Get the right partners. I think that's really important. One of the things that our team spend a lot of time doing is working with entrepreneurs to work out who's the right lawyer, who's the right accountant, who's the right headhunter or recruiter that you should be using. If you're relocating, who should you work with? Because that can make a massive difference, particularly around your professional services advisors. It makes a huge difference to mitigating some potential operational risk. You don't want to fall into any obvious pitfalls of not having the right company structure and right setup in the first place. But also what we find is that we have accountants, lawyers in London that are really experienced and specialist at helping tech scale-ups to grow with a view to internationalization. And there are some choices that you can make early on in how you set up in London that will then help you and make it much easier to go into other markets, to go into the US. Whereas if you take a more kind of narrow-minded view, you might make some choices that limit you later. So we know who we recommend to work with that know your sector really well, that are good at working with French businesses, and that will really set you up for success. The good ones also have fantastic networks of their own, and they will introduce you to investors and to clients. They'll be running lots of dinners and events for their clients. So I think choosing the right professional advisors, you can waste a lot of time if you get that wrong. The other thing then is choosing the investors carefully. So a lot of French businesses come to London to raise, particularly for the later rounds. So often they've raised domestically, they've raised in France, maybe a seed or a Series A, and then they come to London to raise a Series A, B+. One of the things that we hear surprises people is how active the venture capital community is, but also how activist they are. So the good VCs in London, and there are many of them, really properly lean in to help the businesses in their portfolios. They're very hands-on, introducing them to customers, really kind of rainmaking for them. They don't just sit very passively on a cap table. And so if you have the luxury of choosing who your investors are, which we hope you would, then being thoughtful about who you choose to have at the cap table, which is an obvious thing to say, I know.
But it plays nicely into the fact of the availability of VCs and the presence of so many VCs, UK-based and international now in the capital. Can you share with us maybe a surprising fact about the startup scene in London today?
A surprising fact. Oh, I'll tell you one I heard and I thought was really interesting. Over 40% of the AI startup founders in London are not UK nationals. They're not British. And that's probably similar for the other startup founders. And I think that's interesting because it speaks to the openness and the globalness of London as a city. It's where people come from all over the world to start businesses. A lot of those people will be graduates from our top universities. But what that does for a French entrepreneur coming is it means that there's no issue with not being a Brit. The ecosystem is so international and so open. You can belong, you can fit in from day one, and nobody will question that. No one will ever think, why have these French people come? What are they doing here? Because the ecosystem itself is fundamentally an international one. It
is, I think, to describe the British business scene and the culture, it is open. It is diverse, it is multinational, which is inspiring for anyone considering it as a place to launch a business.
And I think interesting, coming from France as well, and I'm sure you'll recognise this as someone who, like me, has spent a lot of time in France, there's much less focus here on people's educational background. Of course, if you're an engineer, that matters. But if you're an entrepreneur, no one will ever ask, what university did you go to? What did you study? People just don't care. If you've got a good business, that's what matters. I feel in France, people are more focused on, I went to this école, or I have this many qualifications.
Yes, it's not something you necessarily need to share when you're pitching or networking in London. 12 years ago, it was the London Olympics. This year, Paris Olympics. Probably a good time to reflect maybe on the Olympic legacy of London and maybe looking forward to what London will look like in the next 2 to 5 years.
First of all, I have tickets for the wrestling and the weightlifting. It's all I could get. But I can't wait for the Paris Games. I think it's going to be phenomenal. 2012 was a turning point for London as a city. And 12 years on, we can now finally really see the legacy of the Games for us as a city. As a result of the Games, we have tens of thousands of new homes, new jobs, and an entire district of London that was contaminated industrial land is now a phenomenal innovation district with world-class engineering, robotics, life sciences, cyber incubators, creative film studios, and a huge new cultural quarter on the East Bank, which is our biggest investment in culture since we built the museums in South Kensington, which French people will know very well, as it's also the heart of the French community in London. And when I go now to the Olympic Park, which itself is just a lovely park and place to spend time, you just can't believe what it was 20 years ago. Now, Paris is obviously going for a very different legacy. They're approaching the Games in a different way, building less infrastructure. One of the big legacy projects is around swimming in the Seine, which I think will be incredible. Yeah. And particularly as we think about climate change and urban heating, being able to have swimmable rivers in big cities will be fantastic. So as a Londoner, I am so proud of 2012 and the legacy, but also as a child of a Parisian mother and big fan of Paris, I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
No, absolutely. So you'd be inspired to make the Thames swimmable in the future?
I would love the Thames to be swimmable. I mean, it would just be incredible.
It would be fantastic, yeah.
I'd be a bit scared of the boats, but we could do something about that. Some quite large boats in the Thames, which you don't get in the Seine in the same way.
Correct, just the bateau mouche.
It's more like passenger traffic. We have some yeah, pretty big stuff. Pretty big stuff on the Thames.
And thinking about that rate of change, as you say, it did happen very quickly in London. Where do you see the city in 10 years?
So I guess from a built environment perspective, we've got some really big new projects coming on stream. So some of them that I'm really excited about include the redevelopment of Brent Cross, which is a whole new town that's going in based on wellness and well-being. Old Oak, which I think is one of the biggest brownfield sites in Europe.
Construction site in Europe right now,
yeah. Which will be, of course, lots of housing, but real innovation district linked to Imperial with the scale up and prototyping and advanced manufacturing space there, particularly around net zero and medtech. And then Earl's Court, which, if you know London well, was where our big exhibition centre is, a bit like the Palais des Congrès was there. And that whole area is being redeveloped with net zero at its heart and lots of live music performance venues. So there's loads of building happening in London. There are cranes everywhere. But more interesting is probably what's happening in the buildings than the buildings. And what we've seen over the last 5 years, and I think the trend will continue, is these really strong innovation clusters growing up in London, where probably if you go back 10 years, innovation, R&D and tech was a bit more diffuse. Well, it was originally concentrated in the East, but it was a bit more diffuse. We now have these quite clear innovation districts anchored around major universities. And I think they will continue to grow, but also we'll see them extending with scale-up space, manufacturing space, and larger scale commercialization coming out from them. So that'll be a really exciting story of urban change, I think. Absolutely, and further growth for the different ecosystems, creating one bigger, better ecosystem. Yes, I think London is this, I think of it like a galaxy. It's a cluster of clusters of stars. It's not one single centre. You've got the Knowledge Quarter, you've got White City, you've got South Bank, you've obviously got the City, you've got Shoreditch, Sutton for Cancer. There's all these different pieces, how they fit together, but then how we fit together with our ecosystem, Paris, Amsterdam, Manchester, Oxford, Cambridge. So London has these connected links, and I think that's what makes us powerful. Absolutely. We're launching this podcast during Viva Tech in Paris, and elements of it are coming from the British Pavilion there. Unfortunately, this year, London Tech Week and Viva Tech have not curated their diaries well enough to allow easy access between the two. But what, having been, I know, to Viva Tech and London Tech Week, what do you take away from those tech conferences as opportunities for founders? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because of the Olympic Games, Viva Tech is at a different week this year. So whereas we've previously been sort of twin European events, London Tech Week the first half of the week, Viva Tech into the weekend, we are separate this year. These big tech events are really important moments for ecosystem building. And I think they say a lot about how an ecosystem feels about itself and how it wants to present itself. And I think you can really see that also in the difference between Viva Tech and London Tech Week, which are both phenomenal events. Viva Tech is big, it's quite heavily led by corporates, and it's very much run by the state. It's very much state subsidized and state run, and it's a national portrayal of the tech ecosystem in France, and it does an excellent job of that. And I know that when we always take a big delegation of London companies to Viva Tech, and they found it hugely valuable, particularly for networking with French corporates, CAC 40, that kind of thing. London Tech Week is different. It has its origins as a much more anarchic grassroots festival where lots of different organisations curate their own events all through the week in all different parts of the city. And I think that just reflects the difference between our two ecosystems. The role of the state is a more French, sort of more centralised model versus a British, perhaps more decentralised, open model. Having said that, this year, London Tech Week is moving to Olympia, much, much bigger venue, and that will give it that real centre of gravity. And I think that's hugely exciting. So looking forward to seeing how London Tech Week develops. We had just outgrown our previous space, which is a nice problem.
Absolutely.
Which is a nice problem to have. So really looking forward to this bigger, better London Tech Week, but still maintaining that sense of it being a festival that Londoners can get excited about. Everything from local schools and charities put on events for London Tech Week, and it brings the city to life. And I think that's a lovely, very special aspect of it. I
think it shows that London Tech Week represents more than something for technology companies. It is a broader subject than that here. Are there any missed opportunities between this fantastic connection we have between London and Paris? Obviously the Eurostar, 2 hours 15, you're door to door, right? From centre of London to the centre of Paris. What more could be done at a, I don't know, personal or governmental level to reinforce the opportunities?
I think we're doing a lot already, and the relationships at the city to city level are really strong. We work really closely with our counterparts in Paris, who are great. And La French Tech has been really supportive and a fantastic partner also. I think sometimes for London businesses, there's a tendency to look to the US before some of the near European markets. And one of the things we try to do is to make it easier for London-based scale-ups to get into the French market by getting them access to the local ecosystems and the local buyers, because we know it's such a vibrant economy, huge opportunities, but sometimes there's a perceived language barrier because the European Union is a fragmented market. People might feel it's easier to go to the US. You have to go to the US if you want to raise a bigger round. So I think we can support by actually saying it's very close, it's actually very accessible, fantastically innovative businesses, big corporate buyers, and we make it easy. And that's through things like, for example, helping people go to Viva Tech and navigate Viva Tech and all the trade missions we do through the year. So I think there's more to do there. And then there are some particular verticals where we have just such natural synergies. So sustainable fashion is one that really springs to mind. France, centre of luxury brands, phenomenal retail culture. London, also major fashion city, lots happening around material science in London and through our top universities like London College of Fashion and Central St Martin's, who are the global leaders on sustainable fashion. So we've been doing quite a bit on that particularly. And we were really happy actually that one of the companies on our accelerator program, Save Your Wardrobe, went to Paris on one of our trade missions and ended up winning the LVMH Innovation Prize, which is a huge deal.
Huge accolade.
A huge accolade,
fantastic.
Yeah. So I think that's one where we could probably be doing more.
I mean, I, for one, would be the #1 ambassador and chief evangelizer for UK and London-based companies to explore Paris and France as a place to set up a business. I wonder if you could share recommendations for a Paris restaurant for a London entrepreneur and a London restaurant for a French entrepreneur.
Okay, I'm feeling a lot of pressure for the second one because impressing a Parisian with a restaurant is a high bar. So I'm going to go with Lupin's on Union Street. Delicious European small plates, lovely and quiet for a business lunch, 2 female chefs, which we always want to support, and cheekily very near my office. So that would probably be my top tip for a London one. It's a hidden gem, or maybe not anymore after this podcast.
We'll put the details in the episode description.
For Paris, I often end up having business lunches in Paris near the Gare du Nord because it's either on my way in or my way out of the station from the Eurostar. And one of the places I love is that about 5-10 minutes walk from the station is something called La Caserne, which is this big sustainable fashion incubator based in a converted fire station. If you haven't been, you should totally go. It's a phenomenal concept. There's everything from an ethical and sustainable fashion department store to studios, but they also have a beautiful vegetarian restaurant in there. And if it's a nice day, you can eat on the square in the middle of the fire station, and it's just got this real buzz. You've got entrepreneurs, you've got shoppers, you've got designers there. And I think it's a really good introduction for a Londoner to not the Paris that you might imagine from romantic movies and everything is beautiful but a bit old, but actually a really modern, innovative, dynamic Paris that's tech-led and really vibrant. So I think that would be a surprising, perhaps, place to go for a Londoner in Paris.
Fantastic. And very quick and easy on the Eurostar.
Very quick and easy on the Eurostar.
Thinking about this ecosystem that we've talked about, I wonder if you could share what excites you as Laura Citron and you as CEO of London and Partners the most.
So I'm half French. Spent a lot of time in Paris. My grandmother lives there. And I really believe that we all need to be trying to build a European tech ecosystem that can compete with the US and with China. And no European city will be big enough alone, or no European country will be big enough alone to compete. It will only work if we do it together. And it will only work if London is part of it. Because if you look at where the tech funding is, there's still more VC money in London than every other European city combined in dry powder. So a European tech ecosystem without London doesn't work, but London without Europe doesn't work either. So Brexit aside, London is a European city. It's always been a European city. And we need to be working with Paris and Berlin and Stockholm and Helsinki and Lisbon and all the others to help our businesses to grow and to compete internationally, because we do have different values. We're trying to build a different kind of technology ecosystem that's probably more based on values and solving some of the really fundamental challenges. And that for me is really exciting, both as myself and a European, but also for London as a city, because that's how we're going to thrive.
And how we continue to thrive. Thank you. I think you've done a fabulous job of selling London and showing how open the ecosystem is.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to talk, and I'm very honoured to be on the first episode of Ecosystem.
Delighted to have you.
That was Laura Citron, CEO of London and Partners. And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, welcome to Business Without Bullshit. Should I, do you want more than that? Should I say my name? Hello and welcome to Business Without Bullshit. It's a podcast. Do I really need to say it's a podcast? Hello, welcome to Business Without Bullshit. We're a podcast. Are you a podcast? Right, let's start again. Let's do this properly this time. Hello, welcome to Business Without Bullshit with me, Andy Ory. In every episode, we talk to some of the most interesting people in business about business. With my co-host, Pippa Sturt, we get to know what makes a great business mind. And we try very hard to work out when something is business and when something is bullshit. Listen to Business Without Bullshit wherever you listen to your podcasts.
And now let's go to Paris to hear from Clara Chappaz, Director of French Tech.
So, Clara, as you know, our podcast is called Ecosystem. So what does that word mean to you, ecosystem?
Ecosystem is exactly what we're trying to put together when it comes to thinking about tech in France. It's, to me, basically bringing all the ingredients to help tech progress and advance further. So it's obviously creating the conditions to have not only entrepreneurs feel part of this common movement, but also everyone was supporting them in this dynamism. So it's investors who are financing the startups. It's obviously you, the media, making sure that we can create the relationships so we can shed the light on those startups, but also the government, which has played a key role into making the conditions we needed to make those companies emerge. So it's really about creating kind of a community where everyone who belongs to this objective can feel welcome and supported.
Okay, and how would you describe the ecosystem between Paris and London, for example?
It's a very interesting topic because back in 2013, when the Mission French Tech was created, actually there was a lot of what we put in place that got inspired by what happened in London a few years before. Because London was at that time, back in 2012, when the Olympics happened in London, kind of the city where the government decided, okay, let's bring everyone together. Let's put everything we need on the table to create the condition to have a tech nation. And so we got inspired with that, and we created then in France a similar ambition and similar dynamism around creating an ecosystem. I think today, fast forward 10 years, what's interesting is both ecosystems have inspired each other at different point in time. So probably at the very beginning, we looked a lot in London, what was going on. I know that nowadays London is looking at what we've done in terms of private financing with TB, the initiative getting institutional investors invest in VC funds here in France. So it's a friendly competition in a way. Both cities are trying to do everything they can to make the ecosystem as attractive as possible for funders, but at the same time collaborating and inspiring each other.
And if you were meant to describe France and the UK or London and Paris as a single ecosystem, so working together, I mean, you mentioned the friendly competition aspect of it, but if you were meant to, if you imagine one single ecosystem, how would you describe that? What would make it unique, the relationship between the two?
I think it's a very big ambition of us, actually, because, if we want to create big, successful tech companies, it's not going to be only French companies. It's going to have to be at a European level. And London being London, and London being a great access to a lot of talent, a lot of very successful companies, but also kind of an open door to a lot of other international markets. Having Paris and London collaborate can expand the boundaries of their respective ecosystem and really combine and join forces when it comes to attracting the best talent, attracting the best international foreign funds. A lot of the US funds, when they come to Europe, they stop in both cities, and they don't see it as, I think, different cities. They see it as one Europe tech scene, and that's something we necessarily need to reinforce. So very complementary. Actually, when you look at the French Tech 120 companies, the top 120 companies from an economical perspective in France, 34 of them have an office in London. And I think if you look at these numbers the other way around, it's probably exactly the same, because it's a very natural step for a Parisian headquarter company or French headquarter company, because France is an ecosystem as a whole country, not just Paris, to go to London, open an international office there and start their international expansion in a city which is friendly to tech, friendly to what they're trying to achieve.
So it's a very interesting context for businesses to go one way or the other.
Definitely.
Can you share one interesting or surprising fact about the startup scene in Paris or in France more generally?
I think maybe I'll name a few. So I personally spent 10 years working internationally, and I moved back to Paris in 2019. So it was kind of being back in your own country, but with a foreign eye in a way, because it helped me see things differently. And a few things that is was surprising in a good sense is, first, Paris has become very international. A lot of people think about France and maybe about French companies as being very French, and obviously as sometimes being an obstacle, like, oh, I'm from London, is it going to be okay for me to relocate to Paris completely? I mean, in the tech ecosystem, there's not a single company where people use French as a working language. And most of the companies we support through our programs, they have, 20, 30 nationalities in their Parisian offices or in their French offices overall. So that's something that definitely has accelerated, and that is great, because it's about building international companies, not just French companies. And maybe the second thing I would note is it's a very diverse ecosystem when it comes to the type of problems that the companies are trying to solve. So it's not like some countries have a strike when it comes to, for example, London has been very advanced when it comes to fintech. France has managed to build strikes in a lot of different tech issues and tech problems that entrepreneurs are trying to solve. And as a result, the ecosystem is very diverse when it comes to the solutions that are created. So you have companies like e-commerce, digital software companies, but you also have a lot of deep tech companies that are really ramping up, that are companies that often have founders that come out of the labs and decide to build their own businesses here in France. And that's a trend that we're definitely supporting, because when you look at all the big challenges that we are facing, and we have them listed in a plan called France 2030, when it comes to global warming, when it comes to all the challenges around healthcare, everything related to digital infrastructure, quantum, AI, all those challenges will need a lot of deep tech to get solved. So that's a very interesting trend.
Okay, so you're definitely creating value with the synergies throughout a larger scale geographically than just Paris.
Completely. I think that has been something as well that we've been really pushing hard to support. The Parisian ecosystem, it's not something we are aiming for. We're aiming for a French ecosystem. We really want to make sure that wherever you're based in France, if you want to start your company, you have the same chance to succeed than if you're starting it in Paris.
Okay.
It's still sometimes a work in progress, let's face it, especially when it comes to financing. Not a lot of VCs will take a train and go to Lyon or Marseille or
it's a challenge we're actually addressing at the moment.
I know, we're doing that very well together. But this is very important because there are talents everywhere. And a lot of the companies, deep tech companies I was mentioning, like biotech, there is an incredible company called Incheck Therapeutics in Marseille. Green Transition, a company called Life, is working on hydrogen as a solution in Nantes. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And most of the company have factories. So obviously you can't build gigantic factories within Paris. So this ecosystem has to be located everywhere.
What would you say the biggest challenge is when you're coming to France to set up a business?
I think first thing is, actually, this has changed a lot. A lot of people would probably think, setting up a business in France is probably not easy because the labor laws are this way or social welfare is this way. But we surveyed 1,100 entrepreneurs for our 10th anniversary. And what we saw is 77% of them actually say that it was easy or very easy to set up a business in France. So this is definitely something that has been addressed. A lot of effort has been put by the government, and we're very lucky to have Marina Ferrari as a digital secretary of state who has joined us to continue working on those topics. But this has been a key priority for close to 7 years, and I think a lot has been put in place to facilitate not only the fact that people can start their business, but also can scale their business. Because the objective is to have a good ecosystem where you can build giant companies.
Okay, you mentioned earlier on a few verticals and sectors where France was rather powerful. Just to circle back to that, what would you say the key industries that are driving growth in France are?
So I think the strength, as I said, is the diversity of sectors. But obviously, we are, as in any other ecosystem in the world, stronger in some areas. I would name two, green tech and AI. Green tech, very interesting trend. I mean, last year, only 30% of the total 8 billion something that were raised by companies went into green tech companies. And they're addressing all the challenges you can think of. So it's companies like Vercors in the north of France that is opening a gigantic factory to build electrical batteries. It's a company like the one I visited today, Greenly, which is a company that is helping all types of enterprise and corporates and companies, small companies, to measure their carbon footprint and implement strategies to reduce this footprint. It's companies that are working on new energies like Éolique, which is working on wind farms on the sea. So all those companies are tackling some of the most pressing challenges. And I think we're uniquely positioned in France and in Europe in general, because the regulation around the impact of global warming is quite advanced compared to some other parts in the world. We have the talent when it comes to the research that is needed to address those challenges. And we have, I would say, the culture aspect where there's a lot of people who are maybe a little bit more advanced in their understanding of the issue and so want to solve this issue. So that makes it a very, very attractive problem to solve. Second one, as I said, is AI. Obviously, you can't talk about tech without talking about AI today, so it's not going to be surprising. But what's probably more surprising is the extent of the attention that Paris has gotten when it comes to AI. We're very lucky that the government started putting in place some plans back in 2019 to really put all the ingredients together to have what we need to succeed to build AI companies here in France. And this is taking shape right now. So it's about financing computing powers. It's about financing research. It's about attracting talents, attracting private funds. And all those ingredients now are paying off. And we're seeing a lot of French talent who maybe started their career or at some point in their career went to some of the big AI labs in the GAFAM companies, in DeepMind, in OpenAI, all those companies, who decide to come back and start their own business here in Paris. And that's extremely exciting, because when you look at the endless opportunities that AI will be providing, basically everything we do every day, having talents that decide to create their own Gen AI models here in France and Europe will be a really great way for Europe to make sure we guarantee a certain sovereignty.
Absolutely. And for those people who are leaving the big GAFAM companies and then coming to Paris to set up their business, what tip would you give them as a newcomer in Paris?
I think understanding that it's a real community. That's something that's always been really exciting for me, is that a lot of our job as the Michel French Tech is to help companies navigate the state and help them simplify some of the steps they have to take and try and answer basically their issues. But interestingly, we saw that by creating those programs where we support company, we were also a driving force when it comes to building a community. And all the entrepreneurs we are supporting through the French Tech 120 program, the French Tech 2030 programs, at the end of the day, you can be working on opening an electrical battery factory or developing a fintech software. When it comes to building a tech and scaling a tech companies, at some point, you're going to face similar challenges. And so what I always say to those founders who come back to the country is, go and meet your peers, because they will make you gain so much time when it comes to thinking about all the issues you're going to have to address, about setting up a company, about attracting the best talents, about being surrounded with the right people. And this is really what we're aiming for, is to have this ecosystem where we're teaming up. We have entrepreneurs who want to succeed together and not independently.
Is that really part of the business culture in Paris to be?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's something we're really aiming to develop even further. But when we talk to the CEOs now, they're really happy that there's always someone that can give a call and try to find a solution on stuff like, can be very simple stuff like, I don't know, what's your remote work policy? Because obviously all tech companies are wondering, what is the other tech company doing, and want to align to attract talent, to more complex issues around scaling and internationalization and how they organize themselves for it. But there's always someone who's going to be really eager to help.
The trends in Paris over the next 2 years, in your opinion, what are they?
I think we're reaching this stage of maturity when it comes to this ecosystem we're talking about, in a sense that we have more and more people who maybe have started a first successful company and are restarting a second one. We have more and more people who have been at very big position in some of the bigger scale-ups and are deciding to take the leap to start their own businesses. So we're seeing like the kind of the effect of the real effect of an ecosystem where people are not only helping each other, but they're also helping others to start their own businesses, starting new businesses themselves. And this is a trend that is definitely going to continue as we mature and as we grow. And that's very exciting, because obviously seeing those people who've been very successful going back at it or helping other people being successful at it can only be positive. So we'll continue, I think, seeing as many or even more people going into entrepreneurship. I think today 52% of the students say their dream job is to be an entrepreneur.
That's crazy compared to 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was definitely not that number 10 years ago. So we'll continue seeing young people going into entrepreneurship, launching their ideas. And I think we will also see more and more of those companies reaching really big scale, because we're seeing nowadays, when we look at the top 120 companies, the French Tech 120, I think 90% of them already have a presence abroad. It's a big part of their ambition. So those companies will continue developing this ambition. And my goal and my hope is that we'll not only have companies that are in the day-to-day of French citizens, like BlaBlaCar if you want to use carpooling, or Lydia if you want to pay a friend, but that those new habits that they've created have really expanded globally.
Yeah. They've become those go-to apps.
Yeah, definitely.
Just to close this really interesting conversation, what aspects of the Paris ecosystem excites you the most at the moment?
I think it's really the buzz. You can see that there's something happening. Just last week, I was with 2 American founders who decided to set up their new business in Paris. I was like, wow, cool. How come? And they're like, because we're setting up an AI business. And basically, if you want to do something with AI at the moment, you have to be here. You have to be in Paris because you have the greatest talent. You have a lot of support from the entire ecosystem, including government. And there's no better place to be. And you can see that this buzz is really something that starts to be recognized globally. The media internationally is paying a lot of attention to what's going on here. We are just a few days. VivaTech is around the corner, just in a few days, and there would be a lot of discussion around this topic as well. So it's really interesting because the days where we had to kind of prove the world that you could do tech in France, and those days happened. They were real. I mean, I remember in my past life, when I was working in the US, some people were always saying, "Oh, really? Tech innovation in Europe, no, this is happening in the US," and that's
Little did they.
but 10 years later, this is it. I think we've managed to, and not only in Paris, London, Berlin, all the European cities have made a name for themselves, and this is extremely exciting.
Special thanks to Clara and Laura for sharing insights and personal experience across the channel.
The next episode is coming from VivaTech, where we'll be hearing from Shares.io, Clara, OpenReach and Bloomflow.
Thank you for listening to Ecosysteme.
Be sure to check out the episode description for details and links to what's been discussed in this episode.
And hit subscribe to get the next episode straight to wherever you listen to your podcasts.
This podcast was recorded in London and Paris by Maddyness for London and Partners, and the hosts were myself, David Johnson, and Émilie Pierre-Desmonde.